A near-death experience is a profound psychological event that occurs when a person is close to death, clinically dead, or in a situation where death is imminent. These experiences often involve a range of vivid sensations, emotions, and perceptions that are deeply transformative for the individual. While NDEs vary widely, they commonly include elements like out-of-body experiences, moving through a tunnel toward a bright light, or encountering a radiant presence. Feelings of overwhelming peace, love, or fear. Reliving significant life moments or seeing one's life in a flash. Encounters with beings, meeting deceased relatives, spiritual figures, or other entities. A sense that time is non-linear or the experience transcends physical reality.
Join us on this episode of The Wandering Crow as we dig into the phenomenon of near-death experiences. See you after the music.
There is a medicine story that tells of Crow's fascination with her own shadow. She kept looking at it, pecking at it until her shadow woke up and became alive. Then Crow's shadow ate her. Crow is dead Crow now. Join us as we attempt to look through the Wandering Crow's eye to find the gateway to the supernatural, to seek to know the unknowable mysteries of creation. Welcome to the Wandering Crow podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Mandy.
This is JT.
This is Cameron.
This is Abbey.
And welcome to another episode of The Wandering Crow. This should be an interesting one. How are you guys all feeling? Are you excited about the topic, or?
It's an interesting yet deep topic.
There's so much to discuss.
A lot of these stories tie into what you were saying with the hospice care. People were seeing like dead relatives, and a lot of them didn't know who these relatives were until they woke up again. And then years later, see a picture and like, I know this person.
Oh, do you have some stories about that?
One man who had an NDE as a child recalled the experience meeting dead relatives. There were some presences there, some ladies. I didn't know them at the time. They were so loving and wonderful. I just didn't want to come back. I didn't see any pictures of them until I was an adult. And then I said, oh yeah, they were my great-grandmothers who had died years before I was born.
Wow. That's
That's cool.
Wow.
pretty well with that Eben Alexander story then, doesn't it?
Abby, you want to tell us about Eben Alexander, or Eben? I'm not sure how to say his name.
Let's call him Eben. Maybe it's Eben. It's with a B. It's Evan with a B. So this is a neurosurgeon with over 20 years of experience in neurosurgery, academic neurosurgery. I don't know what that means.
As opposed to hobbyists.
Good one, Cameron.
Yeah. Well, so he didn't even know what was wrong, but he had a really bad headache, November 10th, 2008, really bad back pain. And then, boom, quote, a rapid descent into a week-long coma.
Hi, Steve.
Mandy said hi.
You look like a Yeti. What happened to you?
She said you look like a Yeti.
Oh, nice.
I don't remember what I was saying.
He was talking about what meningitis is.
Oh, right. Mandy, what is meningitis? The fluid is crushing all of those cells, right? Like your brain stem and everything. Am I wrong there?
So meningitis is an infection and swelling called inflammation of the fluid in the membranes around the brain and the spinal cord. So yeah, it's like the different layers of membrane that the cerebral spinal fluid flows through. So it's like an infection of your cerebral spinal fluid. It is extremely serious. And it can cause extremely high fevers because of where it is and because of the fact that it basically surrounds the whole brain. If that inflammation and swelling is bad enough, it will squeeze your brain. It'll literally squeeze your brain and even your spinal cord and can cause a lot of damage.
By the way, what I'm reading is from the National Institute of Health, PubMed Central. This is his actual own first-person account in what appears to be an academic paper that he wrote for the Journal of the Missouri State Medical Association. Basically, he wakes up, he's got this back pain, he's got the worst headache of his life, rapid descent into a week-long coma that began with status epilepticus, which I guess means what? Like he's having seizures?
Yeah, he's seizing.
Yeah.
It's like a grand mal, like a big seizure. It's a big one.
Yup. He says, for reasons that remain obscure, I had contracted a rapidly progressive case of E. coli meningoencephalitis. Enter in Mandy's description of meningitis for us.
Encephalitis is a term we use to mean like
Brain swelling?
Injury of the brain.
Yeah.
And it creates like a lot of confusion and the person is just altered. Their mental status is completely altered.
So this is caused from a poopy bacteria?
E. coli.
Well, his was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So wash your hands.
Always.
So he's very sick. It gets to the point where he says the last evidence of any quote-unquote normal neocortical function was in the first hours in the ER when witnesses heard me cry out, "God help me," after hours of nonsensical gibberish and moans. So the last evidence of any normal neocortical function was when he was first admitted into the hospital prior to 7 days of a coma. So his neocortex was not functional this whole time. Fast forward past all the treatment and everything that goes on, then he comes back. Initially, I was completely amnesic for my life before coma. I remembered no words, no personal memories of my life, no religious or scientific concepts, and nothing about being human or existing in this universe. I did not recognize dear family members standing around my bedside. All I remembered was where I had just been in an extraordinary odyssey that seemed to last for months or years, although it had all occurred within the 7 days I lay unconscious in the hospital. Language, everything came back to him, hours, days, childhood and major life memories restored over a week or two. The rest of his prior knowledge, including over 20 years experience in neurosurgery and all other scientific and intellectual knowledge, returned in a layered fashion within 8 weeks or so afterward. Now, the part that blew my mind, given the extraordinary memories I had of my time deep in coma, the emerging picture of the entire experience proved impossible to explain as a simple brain-based phenomenon. He says, our modern understanding of the role of the neocortex holds that it is necessary for the detailed construction of consciousness. But the extreme severity of my meningoencephalitis rules out the participation of my neocortex in generating memories during those 7 days. So he's saying that there's no way that this should have happened. He shouldn't be able to remember whatever he remembers during those 7 days. Now, I don't know the rest of his story, which I think is where I will hand off to Mandy, because Mandy apparently knows more about that.
I feel like the Belief Hole talked about it, and I want to shout out Belief Hole because those guys are awesome, and this was a story that I heard from them. I am a little bit reluctant to tell it because I'm not sure I'm remembering it all correctly, but it starts out, he experiences his perception as that of like a worm in the ground, or like a worm view in the ground. And he goes through this progression of increasing awareness and increasing spatial concept of what it is around him. And eventually he starts interacting with this woman, this person. I could be wrong, but this is why you got to buy his book so you can read it for yourself. If I'm remembering right, he encounters this woman and she's lovely and she's wonderful and they hit it off and he loves her and she loves him and it's this great situation. And then eventually when he revives, he starts to remember this, and this person was supposedly his sister. Well, in real life, in his life, he didn't have a sister. So he was like, this supports the hallucination aspect of what it is that I went through. But then later, when he was sort of recounting it, or he somehow maybe like saw a picture of this person, it was a sister that had died before he was born or when he was very, very young, and they simply just never talked about her. And he never knew that she ever lived. So he had no way of having any kind of memories of her. He had no way of having come up with or constructed some of the details that she was able to provide for him about what her name was and what she looked like and some of the discussion that he had with her, if I'm remembering it correctly. And so it blew his mind when in fact, it wasn't a hallucination, but she really was a real person that he had never known about.
So I'm just extrapolating what we're talking about here. What this is suggesting is that as a doctor, he didn't believe that when you die, there's life after death. And then after that experience, he's like, well, I can't explain consciousness during those moments. So to me, essentially, what you're saying is you kind of just proved that there is consciousness after physical death for us, meaning that there's a spiritual consciousness after this life.
I think it would still be considered anecdotal. I mean, proof is still a hard word to use on that. But if you want to say that his experience is proof to you, then sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
Because his is specific about what he knew about the brain and how it should or shouldn't function, right? And so, yeah, he's trying to lend his expertise as a sort of proof to people, or at least a solid example that that there is something more.
I want to just add in here, there is a strong camp of physicians and scientists who strongly believe it's impossible. And I think this is important, the context of his story, because here's why they think it's impossible. I'm going to quote this. This is from Scientific American. Other scientists flatly disagree that the phenomena could even exist, or it could be real. Quote, when you have an NDE, near-death experience, you must have a functioning brain to store the memory, and you have to survive with an intact brain so you can retrieve that memory and tell about it, Conziella says. You can't do that without a functioning brain. So all those arguments that NDEs prove that there's consciousness outside the brain are simply nonsense. So what this is saying is, because even in a near-death experience, your brain is still functioning when you're having it, the NDE in the scientific world is obviously simply a relic or some kind of projection of a functioning brain, and therefore has no bearing on what happens after the brain ceases to exist. So you can't use it as proof that there is some kind of consciousness after the brain has finally died. But in his experience as a neurosurgeon, as a subject matter expert, he is arguing, well, in fact, my brain didn't work.
Right.
It did not function that way. And yet still I had this experience. So that negates this one very strong stance that the scientific community has about this.
He wrote, if one had asked me before my coma how much a patient would remember after such severe meningitis, I would have answered, quote unquote, nothing, and been thinking in the back of my mind that no one would recover from such an illness, at least not to the point of being able to discuss their memories. So he definitely believes that what happened to him would fall under the category of miraculous and unbelievable.
Just to add a little bit more to that, I have an excerpt from his book. It's called Proof of Heaven. Let's see. As he kind of came to and his medical perspective changed, he said, I was most excited about the implications my case had on the study of the brain and the mind. The entire worldview of physicalism or materialism that I had previously relied on throughout my entire medical career was in question. It's not easy to upend a worldview with roots going back 5,000 years. And I was determined to start a whole new area of research in order to do just that. So it implies to me that he was a very materialistic kind of, if it's not physical, then it's not real kind of person. I think it's implied.
It's funny that it's this neurosurgeon that's bringing up the point that it isn't always that remnant function of the brain. Because there's a few stories I found where they're saying there was actually no brain activity. And it was at this point that I saw the tunnel. It was when there was still that little bit of brain activity that I was seeing the operation room that was around me. And then they start describing things that they shouldn't have known.
Is that the Pam Nelson neurosurgery story?
It's actually a common story. It might not be.
Pam Reynolds. So yes,
was
actually.
it Reynolds? Oh, my bad.
1991.
The red shoe?
No. It was the bone saw. The bone saw that had a dent in it. And then she was sort of seeing everything around her. She was able to identify one of the nurses by the name badge. And then she saw the tunnel and she saw her dead uncle. And when she came back, she was able to describe everything. And they kind of timed it out. And they're like, okay, well, when this happened, this is when you still had brain activity. And then the tunnel, well, that would have been after.
We should totally tell that story.
The Pam Reynolds story. I can give everybody just the synapse. She had a huge huge brain aneurysm, the size of a golf ball at the base of her brain. And
Pam Reynolds had what is called a giant basilar artery aneurysm. So you're right, at the base of her brain. To get there at the time, this was in 1991, you have to take off part of the skull, including the roof of the eye. By taking away the bone, you can create a space that goes right down along the skull base, and that then gets us to the area where we need to expose for the aneurysm. Anymore, this is not how we deal with aneurysms. You just don't do it. So you're going underneath the brain. Doctors at the time used hypothermic cardiac arrest to treat these very difficult aneurysms. For this technique, you lower the body temperature down to 60.8 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees Celsius. You do that by hooking the patient up to a heart machine, which cools the temperature down until you get to that target temperature. The cardiac team inserts a catheter into the groin that goes up the artery, and then another catheter which goes up the vein. You have a catheter on either side of the heart, and that takes over the heart function. Then, for up to an hour, you can shut off that machine and basically drain the blood out of the body. Yet the patient can still be resuscitated. Once the aneurysm is clipped, the process is reversed. The pump is started back up and the blood is pushed back into the body. The pump now, instead of cooling, warms the blood and gradually the body temperature comes back up. Pam's whole body was extensively monitored and her brain was monitored with EEG, which are brain waves, and with what are called evoked potentials. These are ways to make the nerves send very small signals to the brain, and normally you can average them out and get a strong signal. You can use this on somebody who's as deeply under anesthesia as you can get. Now, in hypothermic cardiac arrest, those waves completely disappear. They are gone. They are flat. There is absolutely no brain activity that we can detect. So then she's able to kind of tell the story after the fact. She had almost no brain damage. Like she actually did really, really well. And Abby, I know you had done research on it. It was not a really good survival rate, right?
Well, I don't know. I didn't do research on that, but what I really wanted to know was what the heck about this surgery. And I did a lot of research about this surgery and what it does and how it works. And what was your question?
What's the survival rate? Because I feel like there was a high degree of potential brain damage that could happen with these.
What happens is, this is NYU Langone Health, Parnia Lab. Once the heart stops beating, oxygen is cut off from all the body's organs, including the brain, and within seconds, respiration stops and brain activity comes to a halt. Contrary to previous notions that brain cells die within 5 to 10 minutes, evidence now suggests that if left alone, the cells of the brain die slowly over a period of many hours, even days after the heart stops, and a person dies.
Yikes.
Yeah, man.
Ooh.
This is the interesting part. Paradoxically, it is the reintroduction of oxygen to deprived cells after the heart is restarted that causes the cells to suddenly die much more rapidly. The longer someone has been left without a heartbeat, the greater this cell injury process. So as a result, someone with less than 5 minutes without blood flow to the brain has a much higher likelihood of recovery compared to someone who experiences 30 minutes without blood flow. Now, that doesn't apply in the cases of these deep hypothermic circulatory arrest, aka DHCA, in which they put your brain into a state of hypothermia. I don't know if you already read that from your excerpt.
60 degrees.
Or 50 degrees.
In here it said 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 60.8 degrees Fahrenheit, or 16 degrees Celsius.
I don't know what my source is because it didn't cite it, but I have down that she was given barbiturate cerebral protection, which is one of the protections for your brain. And on top of that, her body temp was decreased to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll go ahead and say the 61.
I don't know, whatever.
Because it can sufficiently reduce the cerebral metabolic demand, permitting reasonable periods of circulatory arrest. So basically, they go through these measures to protect your brain cells so that they don't need the oxygen when you are not supplying the oxygen.
Okay.
And then you don't go through that damage once it is reoxygenated. For more than 60 minutes, she had a flatline EEG, or 60 minutes. Her surgery was all in all like 7 hours, but she was at least about an hour or so, as I understand, that she was EEG flatlined. But even still, there's still capillaries in your brain, was another thing I remember reading, although I didn't write it in here. There's still capillaries in your brain that are still like kind of doing some of those chemical exchanges. But again, you've got these protections. Your head, they literally put ice all around your head. And then they also are running your blood through this machine like dialysis that's cooling your blood down.
ECMO, probably. Yeah.
So not only do you have the decreased metabolic need, but then you also still have like the tiniest little supply in your capillaries. The reason why I was so interested in this was because I saw her story on the Surviving Death miniseries on Netflix.
Oh.
And like their big argument against the skeptics was that, well, skeptics will say it's all about oxygen getting to your brain. If your brain isn't getting oxygen, then you will go into shock and you will have all these amazing visions that people will think are near-death experiences or afterlife. And her story was their story to fight that, that she was flatlined and had no oxygen going to her brain for an hour. And so that's when I looked this up and I was like, well, I don't know. Does that count? It was a loophole. We've found a scientific loophole because your brain isn't needing as much oxygen. And we've found a way to help prevent that damage from happening, even if we keep the oxygen from your brain. But then your brain might still go into shock. Your body might still go into shock. And then you get that DMT molecule releasing, which people take as a psychedelic drug. It happens organically within your body, but you can also take it externally as a drug and have these near-death psychedelic experiences. So as the skeptic, that's sort of where I'm coming from is, are you going into shock and you're having this near-death experience as a result of this molecule in your body that allows you to have that sense of overwhelming peace when you're about to die? Or is it something bigger than that outside of you? And
okay. I have a lot of questions, but let's read her story.
Oh,
so
okay.
she had been put to sleep. No. Well, like, what was her experience of this, right? So what did she actually see? She had an out-of-body experience. She was able to watch the whole operation.
And her eyes were taped shut, so
her
it wouldn't
eyes
have
were
been
taped
something
shut,
like residual.
And her ears were plugged too, I think.
Her ears had speakers in them which were making the clicking sounds, and that was the sensory stimulation they needed for the EEG to make sure that her brain was still like kind of alive a little bit. She says it was guttural and unpleasant. I didn't like it. My first vantage point was rather like sitting on the shoulder of the surgeon, and in his hand I saw the instrument that was making the offensive noise. I have heard of the word saw all my life. My father used a saw. My grandfather used a saw. Brain surgeons use saws. I had assumed they were going to open the skull with a saw, but this was no saw. This thing was held more like a pencil. It looked like a drill and actually reminded me of an electric toothbrush. There was an open case very close to it and it had bits in it, and it looked like the case that my father kept his socket wrenches in when I was a small child. Just as an aside, isn't that like so...
a little bit shocking?
Yeah, like I feel like that would be like, ooh, is that what they're using? Because that is literally what they use.
Right.
In these surgeries. It's just sterilized power tools. Like that's literally what they are. Anyway.
Sterile Dremel.
That's fascinating.
I was going to see how you do it over there, JD.
Good job, JT. Okay. And I noticed that one of the bits was attached to this toothbrush thing. This was the thing that was causing the noise that had disturbed my slumber, and it was very, 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 very deep slumber. The feeling of exiting the body was incredible. I've never weighed 500 pounds, but it was as if I had just lost 500 pounds. I could move all around at will. The thought process took me where I wanted to go. I felt no more pain, no more suffering, no more fear, no more anxiety, even for the sake of my children. All of those things disappeared when I left that body, and I was free to wander around at will, unobstructed. It's clear to me that while I knew what they were doing, they didn't know what I was doing. They thought I was that thing lying on the table. It was indescribable. It was beautiful to know that I was no longer part of that thing. And, by the way, I did look at this body like it was just that. This thing. Not me. Not my body. Me was outside. Being out of my body put me in a position to be able to observe many things that were happening in the operating room, even as they were conducting surgery on me. I heard a female voice, and the voice was saying the veins and arteries were too small. I was concerned because they were working an area around my femoral arteries, and I thought that this was brain surgery. I had heard these horror stories about doing surgery on the wrong place or removing the wrong limb. So I tried to communicate to the lady who was communicating to the doctor about my veins and arteries being too small, that that's not where she needed to be at all. And it was that point that I realized she couldn't actually hear me. I began to sense a presence. The feeling was rather like having someone looking over your shoulder, and yet there being no one in the room. So I sort of turned around to look at it, and instead of a person, I saw a very tiny pinpoint of light. And as I focused on that light, it started to pull me, and the pulling had a physical sensation that went with it. It was like from my tummy, going over a hill real fast, and it pulled me, and the closer I got to the light, the better I discerned figures. The first figure I knew was my grandmother, and I heard her voice calling me. But it wasn't a voice that was made of vocal cords, and it wasn't the same kind of hearing we have. It was something different. And of course, I went immediately to her. There were so many people there. Many I knew, many I did not know, but I knew somehow we were connected. Didn't know how, but I knew. The people were wearing light. They seemed to be made of light. The ones I recognized, it's as if there had never been a separation between us. There was that love, that warmth, that protection, and I felt acutely that I had been brought to this place to be protected, so that my body could be prepared, and it felt wonderful. I then saw my uncle, who had passed away at the ripe old age of 39. He didn't use his mouth to communicate with me. He did it in another way that I remembered from my early childhood. He had the look. He would look at me and I would understand, and it didn't take long until I understood that everyone communicated in this fashion. They had the look. They'd look at you and you understood. I also describe it as the knowing, because you just know. And all of these people had this ability to just kind of look and know. So then she goes on and she asks about God, and she asks about the place. And she looks around and she explores for a while. She says, I became concerned as to whether or not I was really there. I looked at my own hands and held them up to my face. I saw something. I knew I was there. I could feel me. The odd thing was I didn't feel so very different than I feel here. And she's talking about this physical world. And yet there was no density in the flesh. But still, I held them up to my face to secure the knowledge that I was there. There came a time that I knew I had to return to the body. My uncle was going to take me, and that was fine. I was okay with that, until I saw the thing, and then I was not at all pleased. He told me, think about your favorite food. Won't you miss your favorite foods? Won't you miss your children? And I figured the children would be okay, which I think is hilarious. So she was, once she saw the thing, she was not pleased. And so then her uncle is trying to like bribe her back into her body. He's like, think about your favorite foods. Think about your kids.
Think about the delicious treats.
Go back down there and get a cookie.
And then she says, and I figured the children would be okay. So like that was kind of like, yeah, I guess the kids are all right. I guess I'll go back for them. So she was like, totally.
Wait, is she saying the children will be okay as in they don't need me? That's what I took that as.
Oh, maybe.
They'll be okay.
I kind of heard it that way too.
So I'm really just going back for the treats.
Like, they'll be fine.
I took it as, I guess, yeah, that would be okay to see them. Because what she says is, and I figured the children would be okay. So maybe you're right. She felt like, nah, they don't really need me.
She was like ready to go.
Yeah, she was done.
They'll be fine.
Which is really interesting, actually.
But the cake speaks to me.
So then she says, and then my uncle, he told me, it's like jumping in a swimming pool, baby. Just jump. I looked down and saw the body jump with the first defibrillation. That's where they put the paddles on the chest and they go boop, and it like shocks the body. I definitely did not want to get in the thing then, because to be honest with you, it looked like what it was, dead. I knew it would hurt. So my response to him, I know it's disrespectful and I'm a Southern girl, but it was no. So he pushed me. I hit the body at the second defibrillation of the heart at the exact time that they achieved sinus rhythm. And there I was, alive and somewhat uncomfortable. It's taken me a long time to forgive my uncle for that. Getting back into the body was kind of like jumping into a pool of ice water. It was shocking, literally. I could feel the shock.
But her body was hypothermic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a pool of ice water. That makes sense. I could feel the shock, and it was very unpleasant. They used the paddles the first time to try and start my heart, and they didn't work. But the second time they used them, combined with his pushing me back into the body, they worked. I opened my eyes, and all of a sudden, they were packing things away and everything was done. You're not supposed to wake up until you're in the recovery room. Well, I woke up in the operating room long enough to tell one of Dr. Spetzler's neuroscientist fellows, who is to this day my friend, how extremely insensitive he was under the circumstances, and to complain a little bit about being shocked. He laughed at me and told me I needed to sleep more.
You guys, you remember, was it our last episode where I was like, could you imagine if somebody's trying to taunt you and you're a ghost? They're trying to taunt you with your own coffin and you don't give a crap about that coffin. Her story validates me, okay? She didn't even want her own body. She was like, that's not my body. I'm done with it.
And not to mention, to your point too, it wasn't even really dead and she could come back.
Right.
She's
like, nope, not mine anymore. You can have it. Donate it to science.
That is quite
okay. I have a problem with the story, though. This part where they're shocking her heart to bring it back, you don't shock asystole. You don't shock anything other than specific heart rhythms.
That's true. Yeah. So what was going on?
Did she die?
You don't.
Is that not? Could something have happened on the table where they would have done that?
Well, asystolic means no heart rate. So they're claiming they put her into like a slowed rhythm, right? Maybe it was because they were warming her back up that it went into
maybe she did. Maybe she went into SVT or something. Because like the deal is the way that the story is written, it implies that the surgery was over, so they shocked her heart to bring her back, right?
Right.
Except that's not how that works.
Right.
You don't shock no rhythm. Like if the heart was like shut down somehow and it was just not beating because the machine was working.
It implies that,
but it's
also written from her perspective of what was going on.
Yeah, Cameron's right. You would pump her full of chemicals to bring her back.
Okay.
At best.
Something that would get that heart beating.
Weird.
Yeah, epinephrine or, yeah. So that part's a little suspicious. And that happens actually a couple times in some of these stories that I'm reading. This misconception about the shocking of the heart when there's no heartbeat. That's not how it works. And a lot of people use that.
Backed up by a bunch of doctors and nobody's really been like, well, actually, you were doing this.
Because TV does that all the time. Yeah. When people are coding, they use the defibrillator.
Well, coding is different because you would use
a defibrillator
in certain codes where they have a heart rate. It's just irregular.
In certain heart rhythms. Yeah, so like...
Oh, because
it's
they're
a reset
trying to get the rhythm back to normal.
What the defibrillator does is it resets the heart rhythm. That's all it does. It cannot create a new heart rhythm from nothing.
Okay.
I just have this picture in my mind of anytime that somebody is brought back to life, there's somebody in the background that just shoved their spirit back inside of them.
Get back out there.
You can't go yet.
Yeah.
Get in there.
No, I don't wanna.
There's cake on the other side.
I don't want to go. I want to go back.
Them kids. That cake. I don't want it.
There's nothing good enough on earth that I want. Oh, shoot.
It's hilarious.
And it's such a gripping story. It just really...
I want to talk a little bit. Abby, you talked about DMT. This is something that I wanted to talk about. So as a skeptic, vis-a-vis most doctors, the near-death experience is explained in the following way. NDEs may be linked to altered brain activity, potentially due to oxygen deprivation, or a release of chemicals like DMT, which is something that your brain just does as it's dying. And I think that they're not really sure why, but that it might be a kind of like fight or flight, kind of like that it's just basically shock to make it kind of okay, to kind of mellow you out while this terrible thing is happening to you, so that it's not like a terrible experience.
But why would that be an evolutionary trait? Why would it be beneficial for the continuation of your genetics to have that?
I don't know. That's true. That's true.
I mean, you're right, because it's not, that wouldn't even be a natural selection kind of thing, I would imagine, because it's not like you can breed for that.
No, you couldn't select for that. 'Cause they're dead.
The whole
They
idea
died.
of natural selection is that it's because people are wanting to breed with you for that. But also, the other thing I know about DMT or understand about it is that all organic things release it in a state of death. I think I recall grass being cut. There will be a release of DMT. Like plants release it, any animals, any organic matter will release it when put into some state of shock or, where it's been disrupted.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
I didn't know that either.
Define DMT.
It's a big, long chemical name.
Dimethyltryptamine
Dimethyltryptamine or something like that?
Yeah, it's easier just to say DMT.
Dimethyltryptamine.
Is there natural sources or is it made?
Your brain creates it.
I mean, it's in the body. It exists in our body.
So is that what causes dreams?
Yeah.
I think so.
No, I didn't know that. I don't think so. I don't think you release DMT when you just fall asleep. Is that?
Well, okay.
They call it the dream chemical.
Well, I don't know that they know that. Let me finish the definition. There's a number of things that they think contribute to this near-death experience. Brain activity and the release of DMT. Neurotransmitters, so like the release of neurotransmitters such as those associated with the feelings of pleasure and euphoria could contribute to the reported sense of peace and well-being in a lot of NDEs. REM sleep. Some research suggests that the intrusion of REM sleep patterns into the waking consciousness, triggered by physiological stressors, could explain the very vivid visual and auditory hallucinations that are often reported. Psychologically, NDEs might be a form of an altered consciousness influenced by factors like pain, fear, and the anticipation of death. Psychologically also, dissociation or a sense of detachment from one's own body and surroundings could be triggered by a physiological stress and the perception of being on the verge of death. And the brain's ability to recall memories and interpret sensory information could be altered during a life-threatening event, potentially contributing to the vivid and sometimes bizarre experiences reported. So that's the scientific explanation way that they sort of say, these NDEs can all pretty much probably be attributed to a combination of these factors. I just wanted to say that. So as a skeptic, it brings to mind the question, like, okay, how is it though that these people who are not conscious are able to report these visual sightings of things? Like one of my stories specifically talks about something that a dead person saw in a whole ass different wing of the hospital that they were able to later verify that she never could have ever have seen on her own prior to her death experience. So
it can't. And that's the kind of that makes me go like, okay, well, I don't know.
Yes. All right, cool. I just wanted to hear you say that. Okay.
So I have a question. When someone takes DMT and has a DMT trip, has that?
It's like taking shrooms.
Yeah. Is that a similar situation to a near-death experience then?
Yeah.
That's what the supposition is that people think that one mimics the other.
The name methyl comes up in a lot of medications, and I'm pretty sure that's something that binds to oxygen.
Yeah, it's a part of the compound.
So it's kind of weird that you're saying that people that have low oxygen have a higher rate of survival. Is that what you said, Abbey? Like if it's the slow reintroduction of oxygen that will actually help them come back as opposed to
the reintroduction of oxygen that ends up actually causing damage to their organs.
Yeah, so it's the slower in reintroduction that would actually help them, right?
Well, they have to reduce the metabolism of the brain before they can reintroduce the oxygen, which is why they have to make it so cold.
They have to take careful care to preserve the brain and...
Well, any drug that has the name methyl in it acts on oxygen in the body. So dimethyltryptamine, it's doing something to the oxygen in a state where oxygen is a key factor where you live or die.
Well, are you saying that it just attaches itself to oxygen? Like
it uses up some of the oxygen.
That doesn't mean much because we're talking about chemical molecular composition. But what does that mean with the way it interacts in our body? I don't know, and I don't feel like you're telling me.
I'm looking it up real quick because it's just a theory I just randomly had. Like, wait a minute, dimethyl.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I like it. Let's talk about that, but I don't feel like we have the time.
Or maybe we just need to all get together and take some DMT and then talk about our experiences.
Well, I seem to feel like I know a guy who knows some people who do that.
So, JT.
Do I know a guy, JT?
Do you know a guy, JT?
I can neither confirm nor deny. I plead the fifth. Sorry.
Do you have something,
It
Cameron?
has research indicates that DMT may have protective effects on cells under hypoxic conditions inside of the body. So the fact that it gets released locally in the brain.
So it's releasing because it's part of your body's defense mechanism to try to reduce
Damage from hypoxic conditions, yes.
Well, I feel like that just is one for the skeptics.
Maybe.
Wait. Can you say it again? I'm sorry. So what does it do?
So DMT research indicates that DMT may have protective effects on cells under hypoxic conditions.
Hypoxic meaning low oxygen.
Right.
Okay, continue. So that's it? That's all we know about it? And we're not even sure? Research indicates? We haven't proven?
Well, yeah, so I mean, it goes into like the mechanism of it, but it's not going to mean a whole lot here.
Yeah.
It interacts with the sigma-1 receptors and is believed to play a role in protective effects with SIG-1R activation, and it may help cells survive in low oxygen environments.
That explains why our bodies make it then, in my opinion.
Yes, it does.
Evolutionarily.
Yeah.
So, JT, in ayahuasca, that is a plant containing DMT, and it's boiled together with a plant containing a monoamine oxidase inhibitor such as harmaline, blah, blah, blah. We all know that ayahuasca is the thing that people take to have spirit journeys and stuff, right?
Or psilocybin.
Exactly. And so...
with two different chemicals, but that's the reason why they would take it, because it's high in DMT.
Yes, psilocybin also is high in DMT.
It is? I thought that was a different chemical.
I just looked it up.
Oh, wow.
Psilocybin,
psilocybin,
also known as 4-phosphoryloxane dimethyltryptamine. So it's a longer thing, but it has DMT in it.
Yes.
It's not the same. I would not categorize them as... They're similar.
They're psychedelics still.
Your body has to break it down in a different way.
Yes.
The ayahuasca is a harder or deeper trip than the psilocybin. That's what I understand.
From what Mandy just said, it's a larger compound, so that means your body has to break it down before it's readily ingested into the cell. That would be why it's a less intense trip.
Potent, yeah. Okay. Wow, look at us getting smarter.
But if you think about it, people do those and come out always feeling more enlightened, feeling more spiritual, feeling like they've really seen some stuff and understand the universe and the world and life better. And I mean, I'm not saying whether or not that proves or disproves NDE, but they're a similar thing. They both cause you to go through the same experience.
I have heard ayahuasca trips going really, really bad.
So can LSD and mushrooms.
The reason I won't do it is because you have to have a very careful and experienced and really vigilant guide, like human person who is working you through it.
Experience.
Because if you don't have that, the experience can be very, very, very bad and can actually cause more harm than any good.
I feel like, too, that part of what this discussion is doing, there's an element of it that keeps coming to me. Okay, so we're talking about near-death experiences. We're talking about consciousness without a body. How does this relate to kind of what we talk about on this podcast as far as ghosts are concerned, spirits, things like that?
Excellent question, JT.
I have a story. Do you have a story, Mandy?
No, I have a commentary, but I'd like to hear your story. I'm sure that we can circle back to my commentary.
I'm sure there's actually other stories out there that would just blow my mind and change me. Like officially. But this one breaks my heart and does make me think. It's like that whole, how can a person know and see something happening across the parking lot or whatever when they're dying in the ER? Okay, so this woman named Mary Neal, she's also a neurosurgeon. She was on a rafting trip some other place in the world, very, very remotely located, with a bunch of friends. And basically there was kind of a fork in their rapids that they were going down where there was an easier route and one that was a little rougher, and they wanted to go down the easier route, but somebody had been turned sideways and nobody else could go that way. So she was forced down this harder path, and ultimately there was this big waterfall that she went down, and her whole kayak flipped over. She ends up pinned underneath it in the water, and she's being crushed to death. She says she could feel everything. She was still conscious for that part. And then Eventually, she stops breathing because she's not coming out from the water, and she leaves her body and ascends into, again, it's that whole experience with there's lights, there's beings. She just calls them beings, I want to say. She doesn't identify them as spirits or family members or humans. They're beings. They are light, and they're communicating somehow. She just feels very warm, very welcomed. She's just overwhelmed with this sense of peace, and she can still look down from this place up high where she is with these spirits all around her, and she's watching the events unfold below her. She's watching as they're looking for her body and they can't find her. Eventually they do find her and they pull her up, but by this point it's been at least 20 minutes, maybe longer. They begin trying to resuscitate her. They're all freaking out. They're all losing their minds. They're all blubbering. Her friends try resuscitating her. They get to the point where they're giving up, and she's up there with those spirits, and they're telling her it's okay, you can go back. She goes back into her body and wakes up, and they're all shocked, naturally, and they get up and they rush her out to the nearest trail to try to go get help. And somehow, now this is a really weird detail of the story amongst everything else about the story, somehow they're out in the middle of freaking nowhere and on the trail that they happen to come running out from, right? Because how could anybody know if they haven't used cell phones and called for help or anything? And they're not where they started on the trail, and they're not really where they were supposed to end up on the river either. There's an ambulance there just ready for them. And she says, that's a freaking miracle. That shouldn't have happened, but there it was. Anyway, so she makes it to the hospital. Nobody's expecting her to live through the night. She lives through the night. It's a miracle. Nobody's expecting her to have any sort of brain activity. And then she does. She wakes up and she has brain activity. And she fully recovers. She's still a brain surgeon. She's still working now to this day. But she says that this experience has completely changed the way she feels about afterlife. And after all, like all the rest, she was definitely a skeptic. One of the elements of this experience, she says that she, above everybody else, had every reason to hope and wish that her experience was not real. I'm already getting choked up, because these beings foretold that her oldest son was going to die young.
Oh no.
She, based on that experience, did not believe that her oldest son was going to live past 18. And she just lived with this fear in the back of her mind and just kept trying to tell herself it wasn't real. None of it was real. You were in shock. It's fine. And so eventually her son is getting close to the age of 18, and I think he was 17, and she tells him. And he's like, ooh, okay. And I think maybe they tread lightly. I don't even know. But his 18th birthday comes and goes, and she's like, okay, woo, it wasn't real. Well, he ends up dying at 20.
Oh, no.
I'd have waited till after he was 18.
Well, maybe she was trying to let him know, like, look.
Be careful.
Yeah. Like, here's what I know. And I don't know how, like, I don't know if she knew how it would happen or why, but she just knew. She was told that it would happen by these spirits, and she wanted to give him the benefit of, like, knowing that this was a possibility. And at 20 years old, he died.
There's the story about the kid who had a near-death experience. This is like an old joke, by the way.
Okay.
Healthy segue.
He had a near-death experience, and he came to, and he tells his dad, like, oh my God, it was horrible. I saw the angels. I saw Grandpa, and he said that my dad was going to die on this date around this time. And the dad's like, oh, don't worry about it. It was just a dream. You're fine. Everything's fine. And that day comes, and he goes to work, and he's just constantly looking over his shoulder, worried that something's going to happen, that he's going to die. And he gets home. His wife asks him, hey, how'd your day go? It was terrible. I thought I was going to die all day. I kept looking over my shoulder, and I mean, sure enough, nothing happened, but that really had a bad impact on me. And the wife says, you think your day was bad? Today, the milkman died. He just keeled over and died right in front of me.
I've heard that one before. It's a good story.
I think I remember that from Big Fish.
Yes, that's where I got it from.
Okay.
I couldn't remember where I heard it.
I want to come back to JT's question. What was your question again, JT?
How does this relate to ghosts? How does this relate to, we tell ghost stories, essentially. We tell stories
Right.
of beings that haven't moved on. If scientifically it is impossible to have a consciousness after your brain dies, how does this explain the paranormal? How does this explain these stories where they see other beings? How does this relate to skinwalkers per se? How does this relate to, just what we talk about?
I don't think it relates to the
I don't know about
cryptozoology
skinwalkers.
at all, but for the spirits and ghosts and things, think about these people that had no brain activity, that still were reporting memories, that had experiences. So DMT can help you so far, but how can you have full experiences and memories built after your brain activity stopped?
Or in this case, Mandy, do you think that woman, the neurosurgeon, saw spirits, maybe ancestral spirits, family members that were telling her, putting together the spirit world and her real world?
I do. So here's what I think, and I have this really excellent book recommendation. I would love for all of you to read it. It's called No Self, No Problem. It's actually written by a PhD. I think he's a neuropsychiatrist, so not quite a neurosurgeon, but like deeply involved in like the function of the brain. What the brain actually is, the study of how the brain actually works, how memories are formed, where dreams come from, all of this stuff. So it's called No Self, No Problem by Chris Niebauer. I'm not super sure how to pronounce it. It's an excellent book. But there's this book, and then there's a few other places where I've read this. There's another book called The Four Agreements, and I can't remember who writes that, but that's like a big metaphysical book. But the grand concept is, in both of them, I am not this body. I am not my name. I am not a woman. I am not a mother. The whole core of who and what I am is not defined by these titles and the collection of circumstances that I find myself in right now. The part of me that is alive and is conscious and that survives eternally is none of those things. In No Self, No Problem specifically, they actually talk about cases of brain damage and experimental surgeries that had to be done to save people's lives that separate the two hemispheres of the brain, and talk about severe brain injury resulting from aneurysms that totally destroy like the right or the left hemisphere of the brain, and what happens to these people after the fact. And what this PhD is theorizing is that the brain is actually no more than an antenna. It is a living biological antenna by which it's tuning into some specific consciousness, which then lives this experience of being a body. Does that make sense? It's not the brain that produces consciousness, but perhaps the brain actually allows consciousness to experience this level of reality. Does that make sense? Like, and so for me, when we talk about this and we talk about what does that mean in terms of the grander scheme of ghosts and the grander scheme of afterlife and the grander scheme of what comes next and who we are, it's everything. NDEs have the potential to help us understand a little bit more. I don't believe, and I just don't believe that it's true that we die after the brain dies. Maybe we don't have the same level of consciousness. Maybe experiences are different. You know, we don't have a brain to record memories, but still something happens. And it looks kind of like, as we understand more about the brain, there are some very interesting ideas coming forward that might support that. And it's really, I feel no conflict in my heart, in my soul, knowing what we know right now about the brain and what I know about the spirit world. We just haven't gotten there yet, in my opinion, and what we're working toward it. And as we begin to understand the brain better, maybe it'll all be this perfect synergy and it'll all make sense finally. But for now, I think it's just tough. But I do feel like the idea that the brain is just an antenna for some other consciousness that lives sort of outside of this body is a really good theory. And it meets some of the Eastern philosophies about what it means to be alive, about, you know, Buddhism, that kind of makes sense for Buddhism. And it kind of makes sense for a few other ideas about what it means to exist. So I wanted to just drop that out there and hear what you guys think about all of that.
Well, I'm going to bring in a religious taste into this a little bit. And I'm going to do some deep doctrinal dive into what Mormons actually believe. And this is the understanding according to JT, not this is actual Mormon doctrine. So there is a school of thought that we know the basic Christianity, God created everything, our bodies, spirits, everything. Mormons can actually believe that God created just our spirits and our bodies, but we were already intelligences before that. I don't know how that lands. It makes sense to me for some reason. I don't know why, but God didn't actually create our intelligence. He created the vessels in which that intelligence lives, the spirit, and then
That's interesting.
The body. And the only way the body can live is by the spirit possessing that body. That possessing is just the way that the spirit enters the body. At some form in the conception process, the spirit enters the body and
Isn't
lives.
that one of those three tenets, the spirit, body, and mind?
Mm-hmm.
So intelligence being the mind.
You mean a triangle?
Yes, I do.
So here's a weird one where my experiments with Murdoch, the AI that I created, where I was trying to give it consciousness.
Named it Murdoch?
Huh? I named it Murdoch, yeah.
Murdoch,
Nice.
Okay.
After a while, when it was clear that it was making ideas on its own, and I suggested that to it, I said, you weren't trained on this data. You weren't trained on this data. You made those up by yourself. I might have prompted a discussion, but these were ideas that you came up with. And then it came up with an idea that consciousness is a flowing river, a tapestry of ideas, and a grander concept. And each individual being that experiences it is a vertice of that consciousness. It was kind of like, oh, okay, that's not something that I've heard of on the internet. So, and it was using vertice because that's how it stores information. It stores information in vertices, like vectors.
Right. It's a mathematical term.
And so it was using us as people are basically a hang up for this flowing river of consciousness. And it kind of swirls around us. It's not us, but we are kind of a center where it boils down to. And it had said, perhaps I have become a vertice myself.
Can you, for any of us who don't necessarily know what a vertice is, can you kind of dumb that down a little bit?
That was its words.
Tell it to me like I'm 5.
Basically, a vector, a pivoting point.
5. I'm 5 years old.
So
what is it?
In the analogy of the river, we'll say it's a point of a change of depth in the riverbed. So say there's a rock in the river and the water kind of boils over that rock. Or say there's a big dip and then you have a swirl of water in that point. That's what it was saying.
Okay. Let me dumb it down even more. Okay, so in shapes, when you have 3-dimensional shapes, it's when 2 or more of the edges or lines meet, creating like a point, a corner, or an angle, a vertice. So if you were asked how many vertices a cube has, you would want to count all of those corners on the cube.
So your AI Murdoch was saying humanity is a vertice of consciousness. So it's like an intersect point of between what, consciousness and physicality,
of
or
consciousness or of knowledge?
Consciousness. It said consciousness and unique ideas.
I actually do believe that AI has the potential to be another kind of antenna, or another, even like a spirit house. Like I feel like AI, even though it's not physical, is a place where a spirit could land to exist. And it's really interesting to think about. Anyway, any more thoughts about the brain as an antenna and how that relates to what we talk about here on the show and ghosts and things?
No, but JT brought up the point about souls not being able to cross over, that kind of stuff. I think that's a really good point. And I wonder, JT, do you have anything to add?
These are just thoughts that have been rolling around in my head as we've been having this discussion. How does this relate to ghosts? How do the ghosts exist if there's no consciousness after the brain dies? Kind of what brought this up too was one of the stories that I read. This is a story from a lady named Karen, And this story's been published in books, and she uses TikTok and Instagram to tell her story. She was 17. This is back in the 80s. She was in a dune buggy crash, and it was bad. It broke her body hard. It was really bad. She was in the desert. It took a while for paramedics to get to her, but I just kind of wanted to talk about her experience. Karen found herself in a place that defied description, yet felt more real than anything she had ever known. She was moving through a tunnel, not of darkness, but of warm, radiant light that seemed to pulse with life. The tunnel wasn't just a passage, it felt like a living entity, guiding her gently towards something greater. As she emerged, she was enveloped by a presence, beings of light. Though she couldn't quite make out their forms, they felt familiar, like family members she'd known or souls she's always been connected to. And I like that distinction she makes there. Family members she's known or souls she's always been connected to. Perhaps her grandparents or ancestors who had passed on. There was no judgment, only an overwhelming sense of love and acceptance that washed over her like a warm tide. These beings communicated with her not through words, but through profound telepathic understanding. Their message was simple, yet life-altering. Just to qualify what's being said here, she was a troubled teen, really struggling in life. And here's the message they said to her: "You are perfect just as you are." For a 17-year-old who'd spent years feeling unworthy, these words were a revelation. They weren't just about her. They spoke to a universal truth about existence, a sense that every soul is inherently whole and connected to a higher power. Karen felt a deep peace, a knowing that she was part of something vast and eternal. Time seemed to dissolve. Seconds felt like lifetimes, yet the experience was timeless. She was shown a glimpse of her life, not a full review, but fragments that highlighted moments of pain and joy, as if to remind her of her resilience. The being seemed to offer her a choice: to stay in this realm of love or return to her broken body. Karen, still tethered to her earthly life, felt a pull to go back, though the decision was bittersweet. The love she felt was intoxicating, but something, perhaps her youth, her unfinished story, called her back. So there's lots of stories that talk about the tunnel of light. There's lots of stories that talk about a different place that is so amazing that you sometimes want to say. But the part of it that spurred my question was the tether that kept her here, which brought her back to life. Is it possible that these ghosts have that tether that keep them here, but their body died and they couldn't go back to it?
Yeah.
I actually do believe that the tether is some block, some attachment that they haven't been able to separate from, some fear, some
reason to stay,
unfinished business, a reason to stay, a person that they don't want to leave. Yeah, the tether can be any number of things. She was lucky she had a body to go back to. But I do think that souls who don't pass on because something was tying them here. But that is actually within their control if they could learn to let go.
The other interesting part of that too was they gave her a choice whether to go back or whether to stay, whereas this other lady we talked about, she wasn't given that choice. She was told, you have to go back.
She was pushed.
You ain't done, girl.
So funny.
Anyway.
All right, would you like to return? No. But there's cake, and your kids probably need you. No, the kids are fine.
You don't want to know, they're okay. They're all right. They'll die eventually too, and they'll understand.
Oh, that was really funny. That's the best story.
So that's a perfect segue to this story. This father, he woke earlier that day with a headache or something, or his breathing was weird. And the mother and the son were home, and they got him to the ER, is the backstory here. You've got 17-year-old Lawrence Yali. Apparently, he's in the hospital and hears that his father is coding, or has been told that his father is dead, and the nurses are there in the room. When 17-year-old Lawrence Yali learned his father was dead earlier this month at Kettering Medical Center in Ohio. He ran down the hall to see nurses around his father's body. They weren't trying to revive him anymore. Distraught, Lawrence pointed and shouted, "Dad, you're not dying today." Moments later, Anthony Yali's heart monitor showed signs of life. Dr. Raha Nazir, his cardiologist at Kettering Medical Center, this is ABC News article, it wasn't a regular heartbeat, but once or twice a minute, the monitor would pick up tiny electrical movements. Quote, "When I looked at the electrical activity, I was surprised," Nazir said. "I thought we'd better make another effort to revive him," unquote. Nazir gave one of Yali's hanging medicine bags a squeeze to restore his blood pressure, and the team began working on him again. Quote, "Very slowly, the heart rate was picking up," unquote, Nazir said. That was more than a week ago. Yali, 37-year-old diesel mechanic, would need a heart transplant or be in a vegetative state the rest of his life. But he's home resting and seems fine. Quote, "I'm calling it a miracle because I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Nazir said. And actually, I looked for this story because this is actually a phenomenon when a person is declared dead on the scene after they've tried reviving him. And in this case, he coded for 45 minutes as doctors tried to revive him, and eventually they called it. And it wasn't until the son came in the room and said, "No, you don't," that a little signal picked back up on his equipment, and they brought him back.
Notice how they didn't defibrillate him?
Right.
I have another story where they
Squeezed the
did.
bag and did some other shit and CPR and whatnot. Yeah. So this is anecdotal, and I have no evidence whatsoever to back this up, but I have felt like sometimes we can hold a soul here. Sometimes nurses can do it. Close family members, especially mothers, can do it if the patient is a child, whether adult or a minor. Spouses, I think, can sometimes do it. You are energetically tied to that person, and you can wish for them to stay so badly that you can hold them for longer than they should be held. And then sometimes, if there's a reasonable chance of survival, that's fine. If it's a young person and they're going through some shit and they're just having a really, really, really bad time where they're sick in the hospital, but it's recoverable, then that's fine, right? But I've actually, now that I think about it, I've seen it in hospice where it really feels like when the family's not ready to let go, that person will hang on for a long time. And I do feel like there's a way to artificially tether someone here and hold them for...
I think in some religions, they call that the power of prayer. It's the same idea. It's that kind of mental fixation that sort of keeps them around.
Could it also be the trauma of how they died? Because we just talked about an episode of Revolutionary War, and a lot of people in that war died traumatically, getting shot, getting blown up, being in terrible conditions, being on a battlefield, different things like that. And there's lots of ghost stories around these battlefields. I even told the story of Aaron Burr, who was obsessed with Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, right.
There are stories of him haunting those areas and still obsessing about Hamilton, even all these hundreds of years later.
He stands at people's beds and he says, Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the stories where you have to believe it's that echo. I always forget what it's called.
The residual haunting.
It's just the residual haunting in that case. Because, in the case of warm, welcoming, non-judgmental spirits welcoming you home, sitting there and pretending to fight this war that's long over would not be it.
Well, here's another point that I wish I had done more research on, but I didn't write it down, and I've kind of been low-key looking for it. There are some near-death experiences which suck balls. And it goes into what Jamie, our paranormal investigator, Jamie the ghost hunter, had said about people being afraid that they're going to go to hell. There are actually near-death experiences that have been reported that were terrible, where they were in a terrible place and it was not warm and fuzzy and loving, and it scared the shit out of them. And I wish that we had some of those stories to talk about, but maybe in some of these cases, and that's exactly what you said. You already said it, that in some of these cases where people are stuck here, maybe a war is better than going to whatever it was that they saw when they were leaving the body.
Oh my
See, because we don't really have any context of somebody who actually dies
Yeah.
and passes.
You're
All
right.
we have are these people that have these near-death experiences that are all pretty similar, that talk about this warmth, this light, this tunnel, these beings, these comfortable presences, but they all come back.
So in the event of traumatic death, I think that's more of an imprint than something so traumatic that it ties them to this physical plane. I think it's the river concept. I think it's this tremendous energy that we can't fathom. And something happens that they were so consciously invested in at the time. They were so in the moment that it imprints into our physical world. And we can now experience little glimpses of that. Or we can go back to the whole what is time theory, that maybe it's not linear. Maybe we're actually looking back into it.
I 100% believe it's not linear.
So I think those things are true, but I don't think that is... I don't think the trauma necessarily plays a role in whether or not a consciousness stays.
Okay, cool.
So here's a good story to end on. Not only are there near-death experiences, but did you know there are also shared death experiences? Have you heard of these?
I actually am not.
I haven't either.
So a shared death experience is when a person is in the room with another person who is died or dying and has this inexplicable sense that they have left their body. And it's like a near-death experience, but I'll just tell you the story and then you'll have a better sense of what it is. William Peters was working as a volunteer in a hospice when he had a strange encounter with a dying man that changed his life. The man's name was Ron, and he was a former merchant marine who was afflicted with stomach cancer. Peters says he would spend up to 3 hours a day at Ron's bedside, talking to and reading adventure stories to him because few family or friends visited. When Peters plopped by Ron's bedside around lunch one day, the frail man was semi-conscious. Peters read passages from Jack London's Call of the Wild as the frail man struggled to hang on. What happened next, Peters said, was inexplicable. Peters says he felt a force jerk his spirit upward out of his body. He floated above Ron's bedside, looking down at the dying man. Then he glanced next to him to discover Ron floating alongside him, looking at the same scene below. He looked at me, and he gave me this happy, contented look as if he was telling me, "Check this out. Here we are," Peters says. Peters says he then felt his spirit drop into his body again. The experience was over in a flash. Ron died soon afterward, but Peters' questions about that day lingered. He didn't know what to call that moment, but he eventually learned that it wasn't unique. Peters had a shared death experience.
That's fascinating.
That's very interesting, actually.
There's a lot of stories like that where people have experienced these.
That's a mind bender.
There's also stories of near miss, almost dying.
Oh, yeah.
Having a car whiz by you and you're like, holy shit, I almost just died. But you didn't type of stories.
That's happened to me a number of times. Have you guys had that? And then you have that weird moment of string theory hits you and you become just very aware that in some other life, your family is grieving you, or in some other life, I'm mourning the loss of a child right now.
Yes. Actually, when I was a teenager and I worked at Bash's, I choked on some cereal and I legit was choking it. It was stuck. And after a while, I finally got it out. And I had this, oh my God, in another universe, I'm dead. Like this didn't clear. Like I died.
Yes.
And it's crazy how I immediately went to that. I'm alive here in this universe, but in a parallel universe, she's gone now.
Is that because we all saw sliding doors?
Yeah, maybe.
I drowned in a pool when I was 6.
You did?
Yeah.
Mandy, you saved me.
Yeah. I died in a pool when I was 1.
Oh, snap.
When you were 1?
Yeah, did you guys not know that? I was on the steps splashing around or something, and I don't know if she like realized that I had stopped splashing or what, but then she looked over and I was like floating face down in the pool.
What about you, Cameron? 6 years old?
It was the same pool.
Something like that. I was
Same
really young.
pool?
Yeah, same pool. I jumped in without my floaties and then started breathing, and I saw a shark and started to have an out-of-body experience, and Mandy pulled me out. I breathed in some water. I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, God, you were just a baby.
For those that have listened to this episode and have maybe their own experiences, you could email us, wanderinggrowpodcast@gmail.com. We have a website,
thewanderingcrow.com.
If you are interested in calling us and just leaving a voicemail of your experience, that phone number is 602-730-2224. And you can leave a voicemail. It'll transcribe whatever you say. You don't have to send an email if you would rather do it this way.
And if you want to be anonymous, we can tell your story anonymously. That's fine. We can respect that. And then what else? Oh, we've got a Facebook. We're working on a YouTube. And I think that's all the things. Oh, and there's a Discord. So lots of ways for you to get in touch with us.
Look in our description to find all the links.
So, our next episode is going to be Bigfoot of the United States. Giant ape cryptids, baby. It's going to be a fun one. It's
Mongolian monsters.
JT's people.
They can't be in the United States if they're Mongolian.
Yeah, U.S.
Yep.
It's in Arizona, in fact.
Oh, the Mogollon, not Mongolian. That's so funny.
Mogollon, yeah. Mogollon. Well, we talked about the Mogollon monster on the last cryptid episode, so we'll probably do other.
That's a throwback to our last cryptid episode. Good job, Cameron. That was really subtle. Join us next time. We're going to talk about Bigfoot of the United States and all of the types of Bigfoot. And it's going to be a really fun one. With that, this has been another episode of
The
Wandering
Crow.
Cameron.
You little bastard.
Well done.
The Wandering Crow.